What is going on, guys? Sixers basketball is back. They have returned for Media Day now. We got all the ins and outs, the quotes for what went down, the thoughts on James Harden, and all other pressing matters when it comes to Sixers basketball. In this video, I want to break down some of the most important comments of the day, the takeaways from Media Day as a whole, and the outlook for the Sixers from here. So let's hit that intro and let's get right into things.
Embiid driving, spinning, fade. 1.1 to go. Oh my goodness, Tyrese Maxey.
Daniel House fills the lane and fills it up.
All right, so the best way that I think I should start this is I watched each of these interviews, each of the media days. Unfortunately, did not get the acceptance into the media room myself with this one. I got hit with the at capacity. Hate to see it, but I will be back in there by the end of the season for sure. But I did sit back, watch each of these interviews virtually, and I dove through, tweeted out some of the more important things. So I want to go through my Twitter and look at some of the blurbs that I sent and my takeaways on those so that I can kind of elaborate a little more on it. But before I do that, I do want to start with the elephant in the room, which was James Harden not being in attendance at Media Day. I'll start by saying I think this is a fine thing. I'm not surprised by that. I was beginning to hear through the grapevine some of the sources, the bigger sources, leaking things saying that it didn't sound like he was planning on coming. I think that's absolutely fine. If anything, I think it would have been more of a distraction if James Harden was there, if he was given the platform right in front of him to speak freely to Daryl Morey on the state of the Sixers and everything else, his hurt feelings, all these things. I don't think that would have been ideal for anybody. Does it still suck for the guys on the teams that they all have to stand up there and be asked about James Harden more than the season itself? Yeah, that still sucks. But I would rather that be the case than Harden be taking center stage himself, controlling things, and having his whole topic of conversation. And from the grand scheme of things, that this is essentially a free day for Harden to skip. It has been reported that he will be fined for not being at Media Day, but the biggest concern for him is I brought up this rule that if his holdout extends past 30 days, that the Sixers can prevent him from becoming a free agent at the end of the year. That is obviously a nightmare situation for James Harden, whose ultimate goal is to force one more long-term deal, whether that be with the Sixers. Actually, I don't even know if I would include them in this. One more long-term deal at another location, likely the Los Angeles Clippers. That's the James Harden goal. By this being a free day, this does not eat into those 30 days. So I think James Harden's aware of that. I do think he will be there for trading him. I don't think he's dumb enough to let this rule catch up with him and let the Ben Simmons rule catch up with him. And it is just a little funny how much experience everyone in the Sixers organization has with these holdouts at this point in time. Daryl Morey begins the press conference listing off a number of reasons for optimism regarding the Sixers, including Joel Embiid being the reigning MVP, Tyrese Maxey being an up-and-coming star, Nick Nurse, and the offseason additions. There was no mention of James Harden thus far. What I think is important here, there was a lot of hype about Tyrese Maxey. It's very clear that that is one of the I guess reasons for optimism, the shining bright light, the frame that beyond James Harden you look, and Tyrese Maxey is what keeps Sixers fans alive and should. Nick Nurse went into detail speaking about some of the topic of conversation and some of his design for how he fits in the system and what can be done. So I want to slide into the James Harden thing specifically. And this was Daryl Morey's first words on the topic here. And he said, quote, "He's not here today. He continues to seek a trade, and we're working with his representation to resolve this in the best way possible for the Sixers and hopefully all parties." He went into elaborate in this, saying basically a very similar stance of what he said with Ben Simmons. To me, this echoed the same message when there was the Ben Simmons thing, that we will only trade James Harden if it is for a player we believe positively impacts our championship chances. If that's not the case, it has to be a package of picks and players that helps us eventually attain that player. If that's not the case, then James Harden's still going to be sitting here. That they are not lowering their bar for James Harden to clear it. They are making another team reach it for a deal to get done. So that is the standard that Daryl Morey is setting. He did ultimately reach that. And as I mentioned, very similar to Ben Simmons. It took all the way up until the trade deadline, the day of the trade deadline, for that Ben Simmons deal to be done, which ultimately brought James Harden to the Sixers. I don't know if this is going to extend that long, but I definitely got the sense that there is not a short-term pressing issue here, that this isn't something that is going to change overnight. Another comment here, and this was shout out Austin Krell, asked this to Morey, specifically addressed the Joel Embiid elephant in the room, which is the overarching theme, and something I'm going to touch a little more on is what is his level of commitment to these Sixers. So Austin stepped up and asked, like, have you talked to Joel? How confident are you that he remains committed to these Sixers? And Morey replied, said, quote, I spoke to Joel yesterday. Joel loves his team, loves this city, and is committed to winning a championship here. They also went on to talk about specifically that tweet from Joel saying that about the offseason that stirred quite a bit. Another thing I'm going to touch on when I get the Embiid portion there. But Embiid did not back off in a way I respected. To keep going in chronological order here, Morey, once again, Harden was the overarching theme of the entire day. And Morey said here, quote, "He is not here today, and we expect him to participate in everything like every other player. Once again reaffirms that he'd be back involved in team activities if and when he shows up. That while he is here today, or while he was not there today, this is not something that they expect to be okay, and they will be coming down with the hammer when it matters." Morey also went on to specifically address the James Harden call out that, of course, occurred over in China in front of everyone. That kind of took the world by storm when he directly called Daryl Morey a liar. Morey was asked his interpretation of James Harden's public statement and said, quote, "I don't think I have to interpret it. He said what he meant. I don't think I have to respond to him that it falls on its face." Morey also mentioned that the track record speaks for itself when following through in the past. And he also mentioned he heard from a number of people around the NBA privately, which he appreciates, and he's disappointed that this is the direction things have gone with Harden. This does suck from like a human being level that Daryl Morey and James Harden have two of the most tied legacies of every front office member and star NBA player ever. That it really does not happen like this when you think back to Daryl Morey making his first big move as a general manager for trading for James Harden from the then Oklahoma City Thunder, when James Harden was a six-man for them with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. That was Morey's first big move as GM, and Harden, to his credit, survived and grew to this superstar player, the MVP candidate that Daryl Morey believed he could be. And Daryl Morey was able to reap the fruits of his benefit, that he was able to build a contending roster, a team that was very competitive, a team that was better than gets recognized by the public perception because that Golden State Warriors team was there. Then he reunites with James Harden here in Philadelphia with the hopes that he can elevate it to bring him a championship. That did not happen. And now we're seeing this thing completely fall apart. The guys that rode or died for each other, that they were very much on the same page, on the same team for over a decade now, to see this just fall apart, it is a little bit sad. And I do hate that that is the case, but that is the situation that we are currently in. When he was asked directly about the last time he spoke to James Harden, Daryl Morey said that it was earlier this summer, but that conversations with Harden's team have remained fluid throughout. So it's clear that there is just no talking points. And just to put a bow on the Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse press conference here, my biggest takeaways, number one, is that the James Harden saga isn't ending soon, that we should absolutely be buckling up for this and waiting for this all to go down. I don't have an expiration. There doesn't seem to be any sort of pressing deadline from Daryl Morey and the Sixers' perception. Also, Tyrese Maxey is the biggest internal reason for optimism. When they speak on this plan A versus plan B plan versus if Harden's here versus if Harden's not, Tyrese Maxey is the most important piece of that. And there's great value in finding out what he is as a player, what he can become in the long term by throwing him to the fire. Let him play through these mistakes. Number three, I said that Morey will not let his personal connection bleed into his management of Harden. I think that was the same way with Ben Simmons, that Morey's pretty about the business, about the bottom line, that he is only looking at what makes the Sixers better. And that's the right mindset to have in this situation. And that's his job as general manager. And lastly, that Joel Embiid remains bought in for now. To swing over to Joel Embiid, actually, I'll throw in this quote from Nick Nurse first, that he did speak on Tyrese Maxey. When I talk about the plan A and plan B, this is from Nurse directly. He says, quote, "The first thing is Tyrese Maxey gets the ball in his hands a lot more," this being the plan in which James Harden is not there. The first thing is that Tyrese gets the ball in his hands a lot more. So that just automatically is going in to give him opportunities for pace. That's going to give him opportunities for offensive creation, both for himself and his teammates. It's going to give him experience in reading defense. He'll have to go through a learning curve with that, but I think the short answer is he's going to get more chances. I love to hear that. I'm excited about that. And that is one of the things that I really want to see, that for the people discounting that Tyrese Maxey cannot be a point guard, I'm not ready to say that. We're talking about the same guy who the knock on him coming into the NBA and in college was that he was not a good enough shooter. And flash forward within the first 3 years of his league, that is the top 5 3-point shooter across the length of the NBA, that he was the number 3 3-point shooter just the second year in his career. That is a ridiculous leap for a guy to take. And I would point to his defense as another reason for optimism last year. And we saw the growth there. I would go as far as to say that he was at least an average defender last year. And that's all I'm asking of Tyrese Maxey. If he can take some similar leaps in development as a playmaker, I do think there's a world where he can develop into a point guard. I'm not willing to say he can't do these things because he has not been asked to do it yet. I mean, we're talking about, if you want to look back at Kentucky, he really was not asked to be a point guard on that team either. He's a scorer. He's a score first guy. That likely will never change. But he has not had to be a point guard at any level, really. Playing next to James Harden, that's a guy who has an incredible intellect and IQ for making passes. Throw him the reins. When he played with Ben Simmons, that was a guy more comfortable as a playmaker with the ball in his hands. Now that Tyrese Maxey has hit this point in his development, maybe it is time to set things free, see what happens in that regard, and it could work out just fine. So I just want to say I'm not ruling out Tyrese Maxey becoming a point guard. We just have not seen it yet. To touch on the next point here, and this is when Joel Embiid steps up, takes center stage. And as I mentioned, I am appreciative of the overall tune of Joel Embiid's comments, that he was much more blunt, much more honest, and open in a way that he is not always the case with athletes and with Joel specifically. When he was asked about James Harden, first off, he said, quote, "It's been unfortunate what's going on, but the goal is to be together and try to win a championship. As far as for myself, that's all I'm focused on. I just want to win. Whatever it takes and whatever puts us in a position, that's all I care about." That this championship or bust mindset is something that he reinforced. He also was rocking a little Red October hat, which I do appreciate. A little love to the Phillies there. A little pandering goes a long way in the city of Philadelphia, so I do respect this move out of Joel, especially when all the good vibes can be possible. Now, this tweet here, which stirred things up, which, of course, when he said this offseason was fun, LMAO, sent out just minutes right after the Drew Holiday trade did go down. He was asked to explain that. And Embiid said that he considered this offseason to be an A+. He referenced how much fun he's had, talked about getting married, his honeymoon, as well as the NBA activities. Embiid also shoots down the notion that the Celtics and Bucks automatically surpassed them with the trade. So this was a cool interaction here that when this happened. For starters, Embiid did address the NBA side of things with the Bucks and the Celtics. He did shut down the notion that these teams are automatically better than the Sixers because they made this deal. One of the messages both Embiid and Morey shared, and I assume that they've kind of had contact regarding this throughout, but one of the messages is that they shared was that both these teams had to give up major assets to land these targets. That while, yes, it looks great on paper, the ball has to be played, that the ball has to be put on the hardwood and see what happens there, and that they lost some significant talent. Robert Williams was an important player on the Celtics, has been for the past couple of years. He's no longer there because of this trade. Is Drew Holiday excellent? Is this a great move? I still think so, but it is fair to say that they might have paid a lot for him, and it is a little bit of an overpay if you want to look at it that way. In my opinion, you either have Drew Holiday or you don't. So it's still a win. I get like sucking up the draft picks and it's a lot of money, but all that. But that was a message that Joel said. And another cool quote he has is, "Anytime that I'm on the court, I believe my team has a chance to win," which I like that. That's a mentality he should have. He's the MVP for a reason. And that is why he's a superstar. So to keep things moving here, to move on to the next topic of conversation here, Embiid also let one of these slip. I love it. He did it last year as well. "I didn't work out at all this summer," he said through a little wry smile there, just to give everybody in the media a little nugget to throw in their story there. This was just kind of my take that as I mentioned throughout, that he did drop in his usual jabs, his jokes, but that he was a little more serious and I guess just honest that it felt like in this one. And another key moment here is Embiid. Embiid in the Olympics has been a topic of hot conversation of what he will do if he desires. I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, it would be very cool to see Embiid playing on that stage, and I think he could benefit from, number one, just having a chance to network with some of these other superstars. It feels like he's a little isolated in the NBA standpoint from how all these superstars hang out. We never see Joel Embiid in those circles, and it would just be cool to see him on another level, on another, I guess, platform, being able to perform at the highest level. But also my negative side is I don't want him getting hurt. I don't need any more miles on his body. We can see that sometimes he wears down over the course, or all the time he wears down over the course of the season anyway. But Embiid was asked about the Olympics, and he said that, "I mean, I have three options. My goal is to play in the Olympics. I love all three options." Embiid says that if Cameroon qualifies, he would likely represent them, but reinforces that his goal is to play in the Olympics, and finishes by saying, quote, "It is a tough choice, but probably going to make that decision in the next few days." So stay posted for that. It sounds like we will have an outcome for where Joel Embiid will be representing the Olympics, what country he will be representing in that situation. I do think that is cool to hear. I do kind of want to see him on that stage. And while United States would also be cool, I think Cameroon would be cool. I'm kind of rooting for France. That I want to see what a full lineup of Victor Wembanyama, Rudy Gobert, and Joel Embiid on the same court would look like. That we would get to be able to see Joel Embiid just be a wing in the way that we can see he wants to play sometimes. So I think it would be cool for him to be locked in, being a responsible basketball player for the course of the season with the Sixers, and then in the offseason being able to kind of mess around, do his own thing, and just dominate at the level that really only he is capable of. So I think that would be very cool. Representing Cameroon would obviously be awesome, and he would be by far the best player to ever suit up in a Cameroon national jersey. That would mean a lot for himself, for his family, for his home country. So that would also be something I would respect a ton. And of course, USA basketball has fallen off a little bit, and Embiid is the level of center that can help ascend them once again and see them take on these other world powers. So I absolutely would have no problem with that either. So, and if we're talking about networking, recruiting, trying to bring in talent to Philadelphia, United States is probably the best outlook for that. So we'll see what he ultimately decides. I am surprised to see him say in the next coming days he'll have a decision, but just something to monitor there. To keep things moving here, Tyrese Maxey slid on at the end of Joel Embiid's media appearance here to get a shout out for his podcast, Maxey on the Mic. Maxey jumped right into media row, jumped in the seats, grabbed somebody's mic, and asked about it. And Embiid then went on to speak highly of the podcast before complaining that he has never received an invite. Maxey went to refute this and said that he has, but Maxey ultimately jumped up and take the stage himself. When he was asked about James Harden specifically, Tyrese Maxey replied that, quote, "As a brother, I love James. Me and James have become close over the past year and a half, 2 years." And then Maxey also referenced the plan A and plan B tactic and says him and the team will be ready regardless. Maxey, probably more so than anybody, is who the Harden status dictates or who the return for James Harden, I guess, impacts the most. If there is no James Harden to start the season or over the course of the season, we're going to see if he can be a point guard or not. That is going to be put to the fire unless there is a true point guard coming back in the trade. So I guess Maxey, I feel a little frustrated from the standpoint that he doesn't truly know what his role is going to look like this year. I think he's ready regardless. I think he has the talent regardless. He continues to get better, work on his game. That I have no doubts in him putting the effort in and being ready. But it's just the fact of we will see what actually happens from here. As far as moving on from here, so Maxey wasn't too notable, brought his usual spark, his usual signs of life, fun energy, but it was nice to see. And then another disgruntled Sixers standout took the stand, that being Furkan Korkmaz. So Korkmaz is now 0 for 2 on trade requests with the Sixers. He, of course, requested one again last year, did not get his wish, but he's very excited. He spoke on the optimism this year with Nick Nurse and believes that his work with Turkey's national team has him ready for the season. Furkan also was asked about James Harden holdout and went on to say, quote, "James Harden, he's a big player. Who doesn't want him on the team? Of course, we would like to have him, but whoever is here should try their best for this organization to win a championship." I did like that. Furk always has a warm place in my heart just from the amount of time that he's been there. I like that he kind of hopped up right in like the main guys ready to start. That was funny to me. Tobias also spoke, I believe, right before Furkan, but I believe Furk was the fourth man on the stand. So very funny there. Tobias didn't say anything super of note either, but very cool there. And to keep things moving from here, next up, we had Mo Bamba pop to the stage for his first moment in a Sixers uniform, taking the stand at Media Day, and he called it a full circle moment to be teammates with Joel Embiid. He spoke about how cool it is to see the relationship grow from a mentor to a friend and now to a teammate, and that he's excited to get a closer look at how he goes about his day-to-day business, and he also reinforced his belief that he can share the floor with Embiid. I'm quietly becoming optimistic and excited about seeing Mo Bamba in a Sixers uniform. I get he has his flaws, he has his concerns, and there are areas that he will be criticized for. But Mo Bamba, he does seem to have it. I like his outlook he brings. It's cool that he is friends with Embiid. And he also went on the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast where he did a full interview. I really came away really liking the guy, and I'm excited to have him a part of the organization. Very intelligent guy, very well spoken, very high IQ. He knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about from both a basketball and a life perspective. He seems to have some strong interest outside of basketball as well, which I always think is interesting with guys. But he presented himself very well today, spoke highly of everyone. He also was asked a question about the Pat Bev beef. Shout out to Roan from Barstool, who was also in the building at Media Day. And he spoke about, Roan asked the questions. And then this response from Mo Bamba here, he said, quote, "From the outside looking in, it looks like Pat is a lot of rah-rah and a lot of craziness going on. I was able to see through the lines and see how he's able to lead a pack from the front. He leads by example. He's very emotional and wears his emotions on his sleeve, but he leads from the front, and that's something I've always admired and something that I've always wanted to be a teammate of." very cool there, him showing his respect to Pat Bev. They had a little bit of a nose-to-nose situation where Pat Bev tracked him down in the parking lot. Pat Bev told the story on his podcast as well. Funny stuff there. Glad it is water under the bridge, and that they will be teammates. And I do see both of them playing a somewhat significant rotational role with these Sixers this year. So good stuff all around there. D'Anthony Melton was also asked about the James Harden situation, as naturally was everyone. And Melton's reply was, quote, "For us, we're just worried about whoever's putting on a 76ers uniform for us. We're ready to jump all with anybody that's here." And he also mentioned that him and Tyrese Maxey are ready to share the floor even more this year. That is something that's exciting. Melton's another guy that will be very much impacted by James Harden, whether he's not in the building or whether he's not there for the season. We've seen Melton be a little bit of a fringe starter, a guy who went in and out of the starting lineup last year. I do think him and Maxey are a very compatible backcourt duo because of the way that Melton's a little more defensive minded while Maxey's more offensive minded. Neither of them have quite the size that I would necessarily hope, but I do think they make up for a lot of each other's strengths and weaknesses. And then about midway through media day, it was brought to my attention, the internet's attention, that James Harden had then deleted his Instagram. So a little bit of going off the grid there and just another little plot twist in the overall situation. The next new face to take the stand was Kelly Oubre Jr., who says the frequent conversations with, quote, Mr. Morey and Coach Nurse were what drove him to Philly. Oubre says that getting back to his roots, and he thought about where he was most wanted, and that ultimately drove him to Philly. He also had a really cool quote here. He was asked about just Philly as a whole and his expectations, and Oubre said, quote, "This is a team that wins every year, right? This is a fan base that wants them to win more, but I come from teams where they have no hope, like zero hope within the whole city, and that's not this at all. So I appreciate the fan base for being hard on this team." I love that. I love that quote. I'm very excited about it. That quote there also got picked up by NBA Central here, so I was excited to see a little bit of traction there. But cool to see Kelly kind of having that mindset and approaching that, saying that he wants to play for a winner. That we've seen him play for a number of bad teams, whether it be the year the Warriors were bad, playing for that, the Suns before they were the current Phoenix Suns, and then coming off last year with the Charlotte Hornets. Just a frustrating franchise there. He was a 20-point per game scorer on a bad team. We have yet to really see Kelly Oubre on a contender, and we've yet to see him on a team. Some of that, I think, is by correlation, that he doesn't at times play the most winning brand of basketball, and that his poor shot selection and bad habits can sometimes sink a team a little bit. Talked about the Philly fan base a ton and just his overall optimism. Then they slid in the two-way guys. So it started off with Azuolas Tubelis here. I also found that he looks exactly like Kirk Cousins, which I did not put together until this point. But Tubelis talked about how he worked on his three-point shooting and pick and roll production throughout the summer. Terquavion Smith was a little quieter than I expected. I'm a big Turk guy. He wasn't as free-flowing with his personality as I've definitely seen him at times. It's a little disappointed by that, but he spoke super highly of his experience at the Summer League, the Rico Hines runs, and says he's already feeling the love from Sixers fan, which is very cool. He is a guy who has the attention of myself and a number of Sixers fans, so I can't wait to see him on the court, and he better get a chance with the true NBA team this year. We will see if that comes together. Ricky Council, by the way, I did not tweet anything out from that, but he spoke very similar of talking about it, that he feels the love from this team, that he's very optimistic. And Ricky Council, the fourth, specifically talked about that he watched a ton of James Harden and Joel Embiid last year before he was even drafted by the Sixers. So I did think that aspect was cool there. And here is Tubelis looking just like Kirk Cousins, as I mentioned. Next up was Danny Green, who is a familiar face within the organization. He is a guy that spoke with the familiarity, talked about the I guess, hungerness to come back was a huge part of it, and the familiarity with a number of guys like Joel Embiid, Nick Nurse, obviously. So he spoke on the familiarity with a number of players in the Sixer organization as a driving force for coming back, and said, quote, "Nick was just the icing on the cake, but he was one of the main factors for me coming back." Danny Green also mentioned that it was the best his body has felt in a long time. He spoke highly of basically having a full year to rest last year after the ACL tear has done him a lot of good elsewhere in his body, just as far as making sure things are fully healed. So he is optimistic. He's ready to go in the season. And I do think he's in a perfect spot to where there will be nights where the Sixers slide him on the court, expect him to knock down a couple 3-pointers, just be a 3-and-D guy, hang on the perimeter and do some damage there. And there will be nights where I don't expect to see Danny Green on the floor whatsoever. So I do trust him when he will be called on for those moments, but he's not going to be a guy that's called on the night out rotation, which I think is perfect at this part of his career. As I mentioned, he said a sense of unfinished business was a part of his motivation to return, and that he believes the Sixers would have beaten the Hawks if he did not get injured in that series. I absolutely agree with him there. If you do want to think back and kind of rip open the scars, think about Kevin Herter just giving Seth Curry 25, 30 points on a regular basis in that series. As much as there was attention to Ben Simmons, that was a root of the issue. So I do agree with Danny Green here. It does make me feel much better to see him say it here. Here's NBA Central picking up that Kelly Oubre tweet there, which I was excited about. But yeah, I do like that outlook from Kelly, that them being zero hope. This is a different standard in Philadelphia. He seems ready for it, so I am excited to see how that plays out. Next up, Patrick Beverley stepped up. He had his co-host on the podcast, Roan, jump in right away and ask him the James Harden question. And Pat Bev's reply to it was basically, the question was basically, how do you balance being friends with James Harden while being a member of the Sixers, and obviously all the nonsense that is going on here. And Pat Bev replied, quote, "It's above my pay grade, obviously. One of my main reasons was coming here was Tobias, James, Embiid, Nick Nurse. But if it doesn't work out, we definitely have enough to go to war for sure." So I do like that energy from Pat Bev, his outlook on the things. And the coolest quote maybe of the day from Pat Bev was speaking specifically on Tyrese Maxey. And he said, quote, "He's always got a smile on his face. When life gets hard, it doesn't really beat him up. Great character person. And a person like that, that's always smiling, always enjoying life. You appreciate people like that, not just on the basketball court." So cool to see that there's already a little bit of a relationship building there between those two. That Maxey is, of course, one of those guys. We know him as probably the happiest face in all of Philadelphia. The way that he does have this vibe about him, this personality that shines through. He was the exact same person today, and that is infectious amongst the team and just amongst people. When you cross a person on the street who has a little bit of a shine that you see, that can carry with you. So I do like that Tyrese Maxey brings that energy, and that does make him all the more important to the franchise. Now, the number one guy that stepped up and didn't voice his frustrations, but it's clear that when you divide sides when it comes to these Sixers and James Harden, PJ Tucker will not be sitting on the Sixers side. When he was asked about James Harden's situation specifically, Tucker replied, quote, "That's my brother, no question. Our relationship goes way beyond basketball. That aside, he has his own thing, and it is what it is. The rest of us have to come in here and get ready for work." Tucker says that he came to Philly to play with James Harden and Joel Embiid, but this does not impact his outlook on the team. So Tucker obviously under contract for the next 2 years. That there are no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And Tucker is not. If James Harden's not the level of star that can force a trade, PJ Tucker is absolutely not. So for 37-year-old PJ Tucker, I do feel a little bad for him in the sense that he is caught in some mixed signals here, but that he does plan on suiting up for the Sixers, doing his job and fulfilling that at a high level. So we will see what happens with that, but I do think those comments were interesting there from PJ Tucker, and I am curious if there's guys on the team who feel similarly but are afraid to speak their mind. Tucker doesn't care at this point in his career. Then the man of the hour, they concluded with Paul Reed, who kicked off media day with a nice loud "yo" into the mic, stepped right up, took things, and made it his little showcase there. So B-Ball Paul said he's excited to get back to work with the Sixers, and then he put a great deal of work working alongside Nick Nurse in the offseason to improve his jump shot. That is one of the bigger stories, overarching stories of the offseason as a whole, is the development of B-Ball Paul, that Nick Nurse has one-on-one taken the time to work with him, construct his shot, make him better. And there's a ton of talk about him playing power forward. If he's going to do that, if he's going to be effective in that role, he has to be able to space the floor effectively. It comes down to his three-point shot. I know this is a former G League MVP, a guy who has had 40% three-point seasons at the G League level. Let's see it in the NBA. If he can just be a competent three-point shooter, it does change the over design of the Sixers and how teams will defend them. So that's what we're really looking for Paul Reed. There does seem to be a ton of optimism around him, and I just can't wait to see it. I am optimistic as much as the shot form looks a little broken at times. The results are there, and he does tend to bang them down when they do count. So another thing is, he was asked with the new contract, did he buy anything cool, basically? And he said he got a new house, a new car. It was cool to watch him smile through the grin there. So a lot of good moments with Paul Reed. And the last quote that I just wanted to bring up here, this one I had to go back in and make sure I got right, but this was from Joel Embiid. And he said, quote, "We've never had consistency. Every summer it's been changes here and there. So I feel like at some point, if you want to win, you need to have consistency. So I feel like that's the next step for it." So that was definitely taken with a message there. And he even went as far as comparing him to teams like the Milwaukee Bucks and Denver Nuggets, who are recent championship winners, when the way the Sixers have not, and the way that they built their core, kept them together. That has not been the issue with the Sixers. Some through their own fault, some through the fault of the players, forcing out and things to that regard. But the Sixers do have to find a way to have some continuity, to keep Tyrese Maxey around the organization. Even Tobias Harris is up there with the longest tenured Sixers at this point. And it is frustrating that it has been such a revolving door when it comes to talent. But overall, a lot of good takeaways from the media today. It is cool to see everybody back in the organization, back ready to rock, and back ready to make a statement for the season. They are now off to Colorado. They will be doing their training camp out there this year. Last year, they went down to Charlotte, I believe it was, with Doc Rivers. Nick Nurse taking them out to Ohio or Colorado, I'm sorry. So we will see what they do at Colorado State, but we will be seeing some basketball sooner or later. Appreciate you guys for tuning in this video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. Let me know your biggest takeaway, your biggest media day takeaway. Don't forget to hit that like button, and I will talk with you next time here on Pick Swap Media.